But even as the investigation got underway, a disturbing counter-campaign was launched. From early February onwards, I became the target of a coordinated disinformation attack. Fabricated call logs were published, AI-generated voice notes were circulated online, anonymous whistleblowers released baseless allegations against me and my office. Fake news articles were published, with one major media house having to later withdraw that because the claims could not be substantiated. This campaign against me and my team was amplified by political parties, including the EFF and Action South Africa, who filed bogus complaints against me and claimed that I was interfering in tender processes. Every time we act against wrongdoing in the department, there is a chorus of voices to defend that wrongdoing and maintain the status quo. We have to ask ourselves why and at whose behest do they work for. It is deeply concerning that we seem to have learned very little from the modus operandi of state capture. What I did do, and what I will continue to do, is to demand accountability. I did not take an oath of office to protect wrongdoing. I took an oath of office to protect the Constitution and the people of South Africa, and I will not apologize for that, not today or not ever. Despite these attacks, the investigation was completed and a report issued to the department. It is my intention to brief you on these findings. I would therefore now like to quote directly from a section of the forensic report which lays bare the depth of the procedural and regulatory breaches uncovered during the investigation, and I quote, "The National Department of Health and the Independent Development Trust entered into a memorandum of understanding which was signed by the Department of Health and the IDT on the 20th of June 2022 and the 24th of June 2022 respectively for various projects to be undertaken by the IDT as the implementing agent. This included the PSA oxygen plant project. The Global Fund confirmed on the 23rd of August 2022 that the IPIP was approved subject to various conditions, including that the total cost of the PSA oxygen plant project does not exceed the amount of 216 million rand. Rizamati was appointed as the professional service provider for the PSA oxygen plant project by the IDT. 8 bidders were appointed on the panel for the rollout of the PSA oxygen plant at 60 state hospital facilities. The service providers that were appointed on the panel were, however, not required to provide evidence that they meet the SAPRA requirements as set out in the Infrastructure Program Implementation Plan. Therefore, it appears that the IDT appointed 8 service providers on the panel for the rollout of the PSA oxygen plants without confirming that any of the appointed service providers met the required criteria, and that being a SAPRA license was again not included as a mandatory requirement in the RFQ as required by legislation. Dr. Sisi of the IDT reported that there was an inherent requirement that the original equipment manufacturers, or OEMs, are SAPRA registered, and that the bidders were not specifically requested to supply evidence that they are SAPRA registered, as the equipment was going to be procured from the OEMs who are SAPRA registered. Bulking, as one of the preferred service providers, did not have the required authorization to use Atlas Copco's SAPRA license, and the use, therefore, in their submission to the IDT appears to be irregular. In light thereof, and further to the information provided by Dr. Sisi, it appears that the requirement in respect of the SAPRA compliance was an important aspect to the entire procurement process of the rollout of the oxygen plants. This criteria should therefore have been included from the establishment of the panel of service providers, and the entire process therefore appears to be irregular. The PSP pre-tender estimated at tender stage was 216 million rand, and at design stage was 253 million rand, as determined by the service provider. And at design stage was 253 million rand, as determined by the service provider. The Department of Health was subsequently requested to approve the increased funding for the rollout and implementation of the plant projects to 592 million rand, more than double what the original starting estimate was. This project was therefore increased by a staggering 174% from the initial estimated budget. This budget, however, was approved by both the Global Fund and the Department of Health. Despite the fact that the issues were raised by the Head of Health, Facilities and Infrastructure Management at the Department of Health, it is determined that the Department of Health DG was of the opinion that the Department of Health could no longer delay the project as was putting the department at risk of losing the Global Fund resources. The issues that were raised by the Head of Health Facilities and Infrastructure Management from the Department of Health have, however, been considered, and the reason for putting the department at risk of losing Global Fund money is not sufficient to proceed with the procurement of an irregular supply chain management process. It was also determined that bulking was awarded facilities with a total offer of 428 million rand, which exceeded their CIDB grading threshold of 200 million rand, which means that they did not qualify at all to be awarded that project. The report, however, does not identify any relationship and or links between the appointed contractors and IDT or Department of Health officials. The minutes of meetings, i.e. bid-specific committee, bid evaluation committee, management bid adjudication committee, and executive bid adjudication committee is very vague and contains limited information relating to the items that were discussed around these meetings. I find it extraordinary that there was not sufficient minute-taking or even electronic recordings of these meetings, despite the investigators repeatedly asking for them. The submission documents that were presented further often contains incorrect and incomplete information, such as the correct dates of when the meetings took place. Record keeping of these minutes are further poor, as none of the recordings for these meetings could be attained, as I had said earlier. These findings, ladies and gentlemen, represents a monumental failure in governance and adherence to the IDT policies and National Treasury regulations, undermining the integrity of public procurement and threatening donor funds. The report therefore confirms that multiple companies awarded work under the PSA project did not have valid SAPRA licensing and therefore should never have qualified in the first place. One company, as we have said originally, Bulking Pty Limited, submitted a SAPRA license belonging to Atlas Copco Industrial SA without the knowledge or consent of Atlas Copco. This was clear misrepresentation. In simple language, it's called fraud. Moreover, Bulking intended to subcontract more than 25% of its responsibilities to Brutes Air Solutions, but failed to disclose this in violation of preferential procurement regulations. Secondly, the investigators found that the bid evaluation process was deeply flawed. The SAPRA compliance requirement, originally stipulated in the project execution plan and the Department of Health's Memorandum of Agreement, was deliberately removed from the final request for proposals. This opened the door for ineligible bidders to participate and win massive contracts which they did not qualify for. Meeting minutes were missing or incomplete, which is shocking but not surprising. And committee appointments for these bid adjudication committees were not properly constituted. The people sat on those committees that were not entitled to sit on them. And also bid scores were not properly documented. Price negotiations were not transparent. In one example, as we said, the Department of Health's budget was 216 million rand, but when the IDT issued the RFQ, prices ballooned to over 590 million rand without a single documented approval or value for money assessment being produced. Thirdly, bulking CIDB grading, as we said, is limited to no more than 200 million rand, yet the IDT awarded it contracts worth 428 million rand, more than double its allowed threshold. Fourthly, the report found that the CEO of the IDT, Mr. Tebogo Malaka, failed to exercise oversight. The report confirms that she relied entirely on internal SCM staff to assure her that the processes had followed proper procurement protocol. She did not verify any of the documentation. She did not act on any of the red flags raised by the Department of Health. She did not convene the necessary risk committees to assess the matter. In this, she was not alone. The report also singles out Mr. or Dr. Sisi, the General Manager for Supply Chain Management at the IDT, for his role in misleading internal stakeholders and failing to act in accordance with his responsibilities. Dr. Sisi advised against cancelling the RFQ process despite clear warnings from the Department of Health. He assured the CEO and evaluation committees that the procurement process was compliant, when in fact key regulatory requirements such as valid SAPRA licenses had not been enforced. Instead, both the CEO and Dr. Sisi approved contracts and accepted flawed internal assurances. It is important to note that no global fund resources were distributed for this project. That is why we were entirely justified to act when we did, to safeguard donor funding, which means that the entire allocation will be spent but through the DBSA to procure those oxygen systems. So I'm very glad that we did act when we did, or if that donor funding had been spent, I think that they may have pulled the entire project. I would like to share now some recommendations, but before so, I want to say that this report does not only identify failings. It also makes clear that important recommendations of the department, for the department and our entities, need to be enacted. Like taking appropriate action against the relevant officials who are involved in the PSA oxygen plant project, as far as they have not addressed the issues that were raised by the Department of Health adequately during the procurement process. This will include, but not limited to, the following. Ms. Malaka, as the CEO, for confirming the procurement process followed in the RFQ was correct, whereas there were irregularities identified, and for the appointment of Department of Health officials as members and not observers of bid committees, as prescribed by the Memorandum of Understanding. Ms. Malaka for not ensuring the proper establishment, composition and functioning of these bid specification committees and bid evaluation committees as stipulated in paragraph 8.1 of the National Treasury's PFMA Supply Chain Management Instruction Note number 3, 2021 and 2022, titled Enhancing Compliance, Transparency and Accountability in SCM by appointing officials as members and not as observers to the respective committees as prescribed by the MOA. Ms. Malaka, together with Dr. Sisi, did not handle the issues identified and raised relating to the procurement process followed in a fair, transparent and equitable manner as provided for in the IDT's Supply Chain Management Policy, paragraph 39.1.1 and section 2171 of the Constitution. Dr. Sisi, as the SCM General Manager, for his role in the procurement processes followed by the IDT for the RFQ processes and not considering the cancellation of the RFQ as suggested by the Head of Health Facilities from the Department of Health in line with the requirements of the IPIP, paragraph 3.1 and 3.5, or lack thereof. Mr. Motatsi, in his capacity as the BEC Secretariat, for failing to maintain accurate records of the relevant relevant minutes of meetings and the electronic records of the BEC proceedings in line with the IDT's Code of Ethics and Business Conduct Policy. All BEC members, as prescribed by the National Treasury Supply Chain Management Instruction Note number 3 of 2016-17 on preventing and combating abuse in the supply chain management system, paragraph 10, which stipulated, and I quote, that every member of the bid committee is jointly and severally liable for the improper evaluation and adjudication of this bid. Provide adequate training to members that are involved in the supply chain management process, including the BSC, BEC, and BAC, relating to the procedures that should be followed as part of the evaluation of bids. This will include the evaluation of the bids to ensure that they evaluate the tenders with the appropriate CIDB grading threshold as part of the adjudication process, and implementing procedures to ensure that proper minutes of meetings are kept by the IDT and that the recordings and records of these meetings are available should they be required. This is not an award that took place 5 or 10 years ago. It took place 18 months ago. Those records should have been made available and they should have been kept. The forensic report recommends disciplinary action should be taken against Ms. Malaka and Dr. Sisi, which will be in the purview of the IDT board. The investigation further recommends disciplinary referrals against several other IDT executives and SCM officials. I've taken the following actions to ensure consequence management and accountability, and this will include writing to the Hawks and provide them with a report to supplement their current criminal investigation into this matter. Like our handling of the George report, I want to ensure that where criminal allegations exist, I want to ensure the highest chances of success. I've also briefed the Minister of Health this afternoon, who has been incredibly supportive during this time, and I wish to extend my gratitude to him for his collaboration and guidance. And I have formally briefed the newly constituted IDT board this afternoon on the contents of this report at a meeting held earlier in Pretoria. Accountability must follow, and it will follow. South Africans deserve to know how their money is spent and how it is misused. I'm confident that the board will consider the report's recommendations and other related matters in due course. We are not just reacting to a scandal. We're using it as an opportunity to get things right in our entities and our department. Public works and infrastructure has immense potential to be a force for good in South Africa. It can generate income for the state to be used in social infrastructure. It can save the country billions of rands in leased accommodation for departments, and its assets can be used for public good. That's why we must use every opportunity to better our systems and to build towards this goal to which I am so deeply committed to. Let me also speak briefly about the future of the IDT. In July 2025, Cabinet appointed a full-term board to the IDT. I'm grateful that Cabinet has endorsed this board and placed its faith in them to continue with turning around the entity. That board took office on the 5th of July, ending more than a year of instability. The new board includes the appointment of Mrs. Zimbini Hill as the chairperson and Professor Raymond Nkado as the deputy chairperson. I want to thank them both and the other trustees for accepting this responsibility at such a critical juncture. Mrs. Hill, like myself, has had to endure the most horrific, sexist and racist attacks against her, often supported by political parties, for doing a job our country has called on her to do. She has not relented once, but has bravely stood up to these bullies head on. I expect this from each member of the board, and I know that they will rise to the challenge and systematically deal with each matter raised in the report, including implementing every single recommendation of this report, instituting consequence management, restoring governance and compliance frameworks, rebuilding the reputation of the IDT to be a trusted partner in social infrastructure delivery. And they must urgently conclude the separate investigation into the IDT's office lease, which remains unresolved. Let me say this to the public. The IDT can be salvaged. I'm fully committed to doing so, which is why I've put so much effort into getting us to this point. I was not prepared to accept the chaos and dysfunction so that people could steal as they pleased. It has a critical role to play in delivering clinics, schools, and police stations, but only if it is trusted, and only if it is clean, and only if it is led with courage and competence. As I conclude, I want to reaffirm something fundamental. This is not just about a tender. It's not just about one company, and it's not just about the IDT. This is about the kind of state that we are building. And today gives expression to priority 3 of the medium-term development plan, which is to build a capable, ethical, and developmental state. Anyone who opposes what we are doing here today, in fact, opposes this very principle. Development plan, which is to build a capable, ethical, and developmental state. Anyone who opposes what we are doing here today, I will soon will make available, alongside with myself, the DG and the DDG to answer questions and to further unpack any questions that you may have. In closing, let me say this. If we tolerate corruption or maladministration, we betray the very people who we are entrusted to serve, and that is you, the public. If we look the other way when procurement is manipulated, we erode public trust. And if we fail to act when evidence of wrongdoing is placed before us, we are ourselves complicit. That is why we acted, that's why we investigated, and that's why today we will move to the next step, which is consequence management. I again want to thank the Department of Health for its cooperation in this investigation. I want to thank those officials and whistleblowers who had the courage to speak out. I also want to thank some journalists that are here today who had the courage to write about what they saw. Despite being threatened and harassed, despite having fake WhatsApps made in their names, I pay tribute to you as well. And I want to thank the people of South Africa for demanding better of us. This is not the end of our cleanup, but it is one part of a difficult but necessary process that we are committed to and we will complete. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honourable Minister, for that presentation. I think, as you indicated, we are going to go to questions. We will start with the colleagues that are here on the floor. We'll take the first round, and then we'll also take the colleagues that are online. May I request that you indicate by showing your hand, and you will disclose your middle house and your name. I'm starting with a beautiful lady here and the gentleman at the back. Any other hand? I see. Okay, let's start with those two hands here, and then the colleagues will be inspired as we go forward. Over to you, my sister. Yes, please speak through the microphone.
Did the investigators for PwC have a chance to interview any MDOH officials? I do believe that there were some on the bid committees, and including the DG of Health, Dr. Buthelezi. Can you also tell us, although you gave the report to the Health Minister, what is the way forward there? We have repercussions for IDT officials. What will be the repercussions for those health officials involved in the irregular process? Can you tell us a bit about, you previously mentioned, actually, perhaps it was the IDT that previously mentioned that there was some resistance to the investigation. Can you tell us a little bit more about that and what was the extent of cooperation from these IDT officials that are implicated? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Azara. Good to see you. I think we've been speaking a lot, but we're speaking each other for the first time. Let me take the next colleague.
Have you perhaps been able to determine whether some of those officials who were are implicated in this probe that you undertook? Second question, maybe just verify how many companies are we talking about here? Those who were appointed to that 800 million rand contract, but who are the owners of these companies? And in terms of the money that's been paid, how much is that? And what does it mean now that we are here? Does it mean that money is gone for good? Have there been steps in place to recover that particular money? And yeah, I think let me end there.
Thank you very much, colleague, CVC.
Just on the business side of things as well, clarity on how many companies actually got to the final bid, because we do get the three main companies, but they were joint ventures. And with the allegations that some of these companies were using details of other companies without their knowledge, are there other institutions from a commercial point of view that are also getting involved in the recourse of this? Because it does then impact other established businesses whose names are probably tarnished and are probably losing out on other deals legitimately.
Okay, thank you very much. Vanessa, can you lead us on the online colleagues, the questions?
On the online questions, Marion Edmund from Copland. What does the disciplinary action against Ms. Maraga and other IDT officials look like? What is going to happen? And when the minister met them this morning, how did they explain what had happened? Also, if this contract was suspicious, what is your expectation of there being corruption in the hundreds of other? What is your expectation of there being corruption in the hundreds of other contracts entered into by the ID? And is there an audit of all IDT contracts in the pipeline? That's all we have for now.
Okay, I'll hand over to the minister. Minister, please guide on how your panel will respond. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Zara, so officials from Department of Health were interviewed, including the DG. And again, I'm very grateful that the department cooperated and that the minister really made that cooperation available to us. Obviously, the minister will want to review that report, and he would want to assess it for himself, and what, if any, actions would be taken. Let me say that the terms of reference doesn't require or didn't require PwC to give recommendations on the Department of Health, because we were the contracting party, not the Department of Health. So they just set out the framework of what took place. The Department of Health will now need to look into that. I wouldn't use the word resistance, but there was certainly some delaying that took place. So, there were quite a few sick notes that were produced when meetings were being scheduled. But we set a deadline, a hard deadline. We made it clear to PwC, who I assume made it clear to everyone being questioned, that we would proceed with finalising the report, whether they wanted to cooperate or not, and then there would just be a finding of non-cooperation from them. For ENCA, the owners of the company and the bulking company is particularly interesting, because if you look at the CIPC documents, and I think that this was also covered by investigative journalists, is that the address that was provided, I think, was an apartment somewhere. So there was no real credible address, and one of the directors turned up dead, you'll recall, once the allegations first broke out. So there's no, I must also just state that the report has been clear that there's no link between any of the companies and any officials. But the murkiness, particularly of bulking, I think would have been a red flag right at the beginning. The only money that was paid was around 13.5 million rand to the PSP for the initial work done. And that's why I said it was so critical that we intervened, and I think it's by God's grace that we did intervene at the time that we did, to stop any donor funding from the global fund to be paid, money that comes from other countries, from other organizations. And if we had risked that and allowed that money to be paid, the global fund may not be funding any of our health programs now. So that's why it was critically important, and by God's grace, that we acted at the time that we did, so that we stopped any payments that took place. So the IDT theoretically or technically is short of about 13.5 million rand, because it paid for that PSP, which has now been transferred to the DBSA. Now that we have the conclusive evidence, I obviously will engage with the Department of Health, the Minister, and DBSA, because the plan still exists. It's obviously around the costings, so we will see if we are able to recoup and recover that money. But there also may be a case against officials if they allowed that they may have to repay that. Let me say, in terms of the disciplinary process going forward, that is not for me to determine. That is now with the board. The board is an entity of our department, and the executive are accountable and responsible to the board. I'm sure that they will consider the report in its fullness and determine their own disciplinary processes in line with their own disciplinary policies. When I met with the board this afternoon, I think that they were quite shocked. I think that they maybe regret the appointment. I think that they were quite shocked. I think that they maybe regret the appointment to the board. They are focused on turning the ship around at the IDT, and that they will make sure that the report and its recommendations are fulfilled to the end. In terms of other businesses that had their names used fraudulently, of course, I think that would be up to them to take action. I'm not sure to who they would take action against, because I don't think that some of those companies, I'm certainly not sure that bulking exists to any real extent. So I'm not sure that they would, I don't know who they would take action against. In terms of other contracts, let me say that, I think that if there is a weak process that has been exposed here, that obviously is a concern for me with regards to other projects. And so I'm quite sure that the board, as one of the recommendations state, will consider the supply chain management process and what is required. And I really do want to underscore this point, because I think some of our detractors has said that we want to use this to sort of weaken the institution or ultimately get rid of the IDT. There's no one more committed to ensuring the success of the IDT than myself. If I was, wanted to weaken the institution, I would have let things carry on as they are, and then the IDT would have collapsed in on itself. It's because we have stepped in at the juncture that we did, and we took the actions that we did, that we were able to at least give it a very good chance at being righted. And in fact, I'll shortly be meeting with the Presidential Commission on State-owned enterprises and entities to see how we start that restructuring in that process to keeping the IDT, because I've been very clear that it has a role to play and we want to save it. So I'm going to hand then over to the DDG for corporate governance and compliance, and he will answer some other questions. DDG.
Thank you, Minister, and also welcome investigators, journalists in the House. Some of the issues and areas that resulted in the delays, I think I want to also align to the Minister in terms of the delays, not necessarily resistance, quite a few issues to consider. One is that, again, in the Minister's presentation, he made mention of the fact that there was instability in terms of the board. At the time, there was no chairperson as well as the deputy chair. So which basically means that they go between the department and the board, because the accountability aspect between the entity and the department is between the minister and the chairperson of the board. Now then it becomes the company secretary. So which means that the reliance on information flowing between the two entities is as a result of is the connection and the flow between the company secretary and the department. Now the second aspect as well is that the availability of information as well was also an issue, credibility of that information. One of it being the fact that, one, you had requested information when it was an internal investigation, which basically was to gather facts. That also assisted us in drafting the terms of references for the full investigation. Now, when the investigation then started, you also had to request the same information, but also beyond that information, because we had broadened the scope of that investigation. So the challenge then also became, again, the availability of the information, because we had to rely to very limited people who would actually provide that information, in this case, company secretary. So if the company secretary is not available, then you have to rely on the executive. And then there's also an internal processes of whether the information that comes from the executives, is it something that can be accepted in the given the fact that you still had challenges of governance and the issues around the board. Then the third aspect also that also resulted in this is also the fact that we had to also do investigations between or rather interviews, because there were questions around interviews between this is the Department of Health as well as IDT and the Department of Public Works. We also have information that we also gather from the interviews from the health. Now also that's another government entity or government legal body that we also have to allow some internal processes to government entity or government legal body that we also have to allow some internal processes to allow. So which means that for us to be able to interview, it also has to come from a minister to minister letter, accounting officer accounting letter, and then that also delays the process in terms of that. But also beyond that will be availability of those that we also take part in terms of the interviews. Then the fourth aspect that is also very critical also to consider is availability of information as well. That we're also talking about stolen and lost equipment, particularly a computer that had most of the information, which was basically from the project manager, which was basically difficult to get that information. Now, to correlate that information, you have to collect information from what you currently have as limited information, as well as interviews. So you have to now look at the correlation of that information, coordination of that information, and then you have a synthesis and assessment of that information. So all of those also affected the process and the timing of this as well. But I think more so it was basically the delay. But I think the final report is showing that there were some elements around, particularly the terms of references, irregularities around the procurement that can actually be is actually been presented by the minister in that regard. Thank you very much.
Thank you, colleagues. The name of this gentleman in the department, we call him Shorty because he's the shortest to all of us. Let's take the second round, the final round, colleagues. Let me start this time around with the colleagues online. Vanessa. Okay, I'll move to the colleagues in the room. I think there's my colleague here in front. You will be next, my brother. Moloko, you will have the second bite. And then my colleague here on the left. So in that order, over to you.
Thanks, President Director. Michael from the SABC Channel Africa. Minister, Minister, besides this covering of this corruption scandal, you have also suspended the EPWP projects in Macpherson, where you have also uncovered that there are some individuals who were inflating their salaries where it were not meant to be. So what will happen to, because you might have maybe legitimate employees that were doing their work without interfering with the corruption tendencies that you have uncovered. What will happen to those that were working legitimately?
Okay. Next colleague.
Thank you very much, Program Director. Yushio Panche from Delhi.
The microphone, switch it on, please.
Thank you. Yushio Panche from Delhi Maverick. My other question is already been answered, but I'm just really curious. So you mentioned that there's a long period of meeting minutes and of meeting recordings with no real logs kept. When those questions were placed to the relevant persons, I'm just genuinely curious, what was their response? What did they say? Why there were no records?
Okay, thank you very much. The next colleague.
All right. Mulu again from INSI. Yes, I was hoping that I would do a one-on-one with you. Unfortunately, I'm informed by your Mr. Khan. And it's a pity because there are reasons, operational reasons why Q&A's one-on-one work for us. Nonetheless, I think I heard you repeatedly saying that the investigation did not reveal any link between officials of IDT and the contractors. I'm sure you know by now that no one is going to open a company in their names when they are at the center. I'm saying this in the context of what you said, I think, in April, that there's a lifestyle audit that is supposed to take place. How far is that? If you can give us an update. In regard to those companies, when are you blacklisting them from the central database so that they can no longer do business with the government? And did this probe find that at some point any of the officials in the IDT tried to blow the whistle? Or all those who were involved and those who were aware, to your knowledge, decided to keep quiet and allow the gravy train to carry on? And what was the role of the previous board, who had a fiduciary duty to play an oversight role? Maybe also confirm for us, I might get this wrong, and if I do, I apologize. The current Deputy Minister of Higher Education, Dr. Nomusa, was she part of the Board of Trustees at the time? All right, I will withdraw that. But yeah, generally those who were there, what was their role? And all right, I will withdraw that. But yeah, generally those who were there, what was their role? And finally, where is your deputy? Because he was the minister at the time and the sole shareholder. Have you had a chat with him to say what role in terms of playing oversight did you play? And does he support all these efforts that you are making? But also, why is he not here with you?
Okay, thank you very much.
And on that note, perhaps the last one, the department itself, seeing we have the head honchos here, even before perhaps this matter spilled out in the list here, were you completely in the dark?
Okay, thank you. Next colleague.
Thank you very much. I'm Tabu Mokoko from IOF. I just have two simple questions. One being that how much did this investigation cost the department? And secondly, of course, I mean, maybe this is just, a build up to the recent question the gentleman just asked. I know for a fact that there were public, media briefings made by you, Minister, of course, and your deputy, where the deputy was obviously, defending himself after reports emerged that he was basically, trying to sort of like protect some individuals Now, after having this report released today, do you still believe that your deputy was sort of, I'm not saying that, of course, you did actually believe in the first place, but the reports were suggesting that he was on the side of the IDT and, sort of like, protecting certain people. So do you still believe, after having this report released today, that he may have actually tried to protect a certain individual within the IDT? Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. I think this will be our final round. We'll therefore, after the minister's response, will I chair over to the minister.
Thank you very much. 1.9 million rand to complete. The Deputy Minister absolutely supports the work that we are doing. He's part of the department, and there is absolutely nothing in the report or any evidence that has been produced against him to suggest that he was a part of anything like this. And I think that anyone who attempts to suggest that or try to drive a wedge between me and him is quite frankly being mischievous. And also, I wonder whether you ask other ministers when they give press briefings where the deputy ministers are. You only ask me that because you want to drive a wedge between us, and it's not going to work. So that deals with that. In terms of blacklisting these companies, ENCA, I think that they obviously would have a case to be blacklisted. But again, because we are a department of due process, that will have to go through a process of the CIDB itself. You are right insofar as that obviously we have said that the report makes no link between the IDT officials and contractors. But you are also right as well that no one registers a company in their own name. But we can only work off of the evidence that which is provided to us. So, of course, if any evidence comes forward to suggest something else, we would also look into that. I just want to say I did report or did record in my briefing that I was not satisfied with the answers that the previous board gave me. I asked them to respond to the allegations. We didn't get satisfactory answers. I asked them for documentation. They couldn't provide complete documentation. They said there was nothing wrong, and then a month later, then they said, well, there actually might have been something wrong. So, one of the reasons why I removed some people from that board was a failure of fiduciary duties. And I'm confident that the new board that we have will certainly seek to do better and use this report to implement strict fiduciary controls going forward. Yes, I was absolutely in the dark. The first time I heard about even this issue was the publication of the of that forensic journalist article, and it was based on that I then said, please can I have answers to these questions? And I just wanted them to answer the questions that had been posed there. You asked what was the response from officials, Daily Maverick, to the request for records. The problem is they just never replied. So, it's easier just to never reply than it is to say, I don't have them. And repeatedly, people were asked, senior executives were asked for the reports by PwC, the recordings, the minutes, and they just didn't come through. To SABC around EPWP, let me say that the issue of EPWP, I think the story out of Macpherson has really infuriated South Africans. I think people are tired of seeing officials and politicians abuse money that should be used for developmental purposes. And quite frankly, if you want to take money out of EPWP to pay yourself 40 and 50,000 rand, I think that you are possibly a very immoral individual, because that money is meant to assist poverty alleviation. People who sit in abject poverty, that's what that money is used for. And yet we have people who think that it is there to supplement their salaries or loss of salaries. So was it a drastic response? Yes, it was. And I think that the situation deserved a decisive response, to send a warning to other municipalities that if they think that they are going to do that and get away with it, they too will be subjected to that. We are conducting a quick investigation. It's not going to be long, a week or 2 weeks at maximum. And then once we have isolated the full suite of people that are involved, we will resume those transfers, because I'm not convinced it's just those few individuals. Those are the individuals that have been exposed, but there may be more. And so if you just have a blank check to say, well, we'll keep doing it until we get to the bottom of it, you actually may be feeding the problem. And in fact, I've actually got a number of tip-offs of other municipalities that are doing exactly the same thing. And that speaks to our determination to reform the EPWP program so that it can be sustainable for the next 20 years, and that it is a pathway to long-term employment and opportunity, and not the short-term, and that it is a pathway to long-term employment and opportunity, and not the short-term nature of it. Impact for millions of South Africans over the last 20 years. But the interactions that I've had with communities across the country are saying that it's time for something new. It's time for something more bold. And I think that really excites me and excites people. But if we're going to do that, we need to make sure that the fundamentals of the program are solid, that there is not an opportunity to abuse it, like we've seen in Macpherson. So I know that they are conducting investigation. I look forward to getting a copy of that. My officials are on the ground in the municipality through EPWP doing the same. And once we have that, and we've satisfied ourselves that it's just those people, or if it's more, we will resume, as they say in the movies, regular programming. Thank you. Sir, yes, on the lifestyle audits, thank you. I'm going to ask the DDG to respond to those. But let me say why we started with the program of lifestyle audits. We have, and when you asked people to justify why they are, driving a 3 million rand Porsche, they can't tell you why. And that is a red flag. That's not targeting anyone. That's ensuring that we have people that put the country first as opposed to their own bank accounts first. And so we instituted two things at the same time. The first one was about ghost employee audits. And there we required every single employee of this department to arrive at work and identify themselves, or do so through a virtual platform where they had to put their camera on and have their ID next to their face like they do with some banks. Even the DG had to do it. He had to identify himself, because we want to understand, A, who's working for us. Secondly, we then say, who are these high-risk individuals? And we have 400 high-risk individuals. If you think about that for a moment, I think that's roughly nearly 10% of our workforce. 10% of your workforce is classified as high risk, and we do nothing about it. So we have to act with speed. Of course, these things take time. The ghost audit will be released, I'm told, within the next 3 months. I would like it to be done sooner. This audit will be released, I'm told, within the next 3 months. I would like it to be done sooner. The first round of audits has been completed by the end of September. The next round after that will be the end of March, and then the final one will be towards the end of next year. But these are very intensive. These are not just, sort of send me your pay slips. We want to understand, how did you acquire that property? How did you pay for that car? Why don't you have car finance? Why don't you have a mortgage but you live in an expensive house? Those are all important questions that we get to the bottom of. And that's why we are working so closely with the SIU to do so. So the SIU is at the heart, and the head of the SIU has been incredibly helpful to us. Because at the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen, I want a department that delivers for South Africa. Public Works has been at the heart of so many public embarrassments for government. And we want to be the pride of place in government, not the embarrassment of government. But in order to do that, we have got to say that the staff, the employees, and the management of this department are above and beyond any reproach or questions of impropriety. DDG and DG, maybe you want to say something in closing. You go first and then the DG.
Thank you, Minister. And on the issue of lifestyle, what the Minister was basically talking about in terms of the high risk, that's a departmental process that we have been embarking on, broken down in 2-year period, on 4 cohorts, 6 months. And then when the board was established, the appointment of the new board, they also, I think at the end of May, beginning of June, it was resolved in the first board meeting or the early board meetings that also they need to conduct a lifestyle audit. Now, because this is the first and it's new in government, now they reached to the department to look at the processes we follow. Now, the 3 things that are very important so that there's an understanding of where we are with the IDT on the issues of lifestyle audit. The first is being a lifestyle review. That's normally part of the processes where you look at your financial disclosure. I think we need to make mention of issues of assets, which are also contained in the disclosure. The second is what if the disclosure, if from the financial disclosures of lifestyle reviews, the issues that are raised, then you should then go to the lifestyle investigation. Now, if lifestyle investigation raises more issues, then it goes into a full-blown lifestyle audit. Now, that's different because the lifestyle investigation and the reviews are okay because these are processes that are built in within our systems that can be done internally. But with the lifestyle audit, then it becomes a different approach because now you need to look at the external parties that can assist in terms of assisting the process, in this case, in our case, SIU. Now, we've also assisted in IDT to also connect them with the SIU to start the discussions around. Now, second is to also develop the terms of references for that lifestyle audit, but also important to that, because you're dealing with sensitive information when it comes to the lifestyle audit, you now have to have an ethics officer, of which now that's sensitive information when it comes to the lifestyle audit, you now have to have an ethics officer, of which now that's a discussion that we're currently having with the IDT to deal with the issues of ethics officer in line with the DPSA regulation. So we are in the process of assisting IDT and also to look at those issues of conducting the lifestyle, which means that that's a full-blown lifestyle audit that we are assisting. So that's a journey that we are taking. We're working together with the IDT on our side, assisting them, and also on their side is taking it responsibility to a full assessment of their lifestyle audit. Yeah, I think that's basically what we currently have now. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you very much, colleagues and people of the media. Maybe just to answer another one where you asked where the DM is having engagement with the Minister of Human Settlements in our head office in CGO in Pretoria. So he's actually at work. And then secondly, when it comes to the lifestyle audit, I just want to maybe highlight, the Minister just spoke about the high risk employees. Maybe you might ask a question, who are those people? When you look at me, I'm a DG, I'm a high risk because people want to meet with me, they want to engage with me. So we've done the first layer of the DDGs, chief directors. There's about 48 employees that we've completed. And then the next level of high risk are those people who work, as the Minister explained, there's millions of friends that deal with. Those are people in SCM, supply chain management, which is quite the people that interact with your suppliers, etc. People in ICT and many other areas of SCM-related governance and legal as well, because they actually interact with contracts. So I think with that, Minister, I will believe that part of our reforms that we're actually trying to implement around SCM, particularly as public works, although this is about IDT, I've said in another platform that we are really pushing this e-procurement system as public works to eliminate the issue of a human sort of contact so that the processes are seamless. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Honourable Minister. Thank you, DG. Thank you, Mr. Mahlangu. Mr. Minister, I want to declare I'm also a high risk, only because journalists are calling me all the time.